Good morning, doctors. How are you? Sara.
Oh, yeah, I did. That one I got home. Didn't sleep much, but I did that. I don't know. I'm giving a disagreement. He's been there before. I'm not so keen on that, on the Sephardic things. It's different. It's something different that you're not used to. I don't know. It's another Arabic thing. So last night, one moment of humor. Dr. D is standing at the stage. She's got Phil, Toby, Liza, and a fourth woman.
Right.
And I'm looking at it going, we know who's playing center on that basketball team.
No clip. Where's the clip?
It's a great program. What are you missing?
There's a clip. There's supposed to be a clip with this thing. No, if you're here, I need the clip. I don't know how to do this. Good morning, good morning.
No, he's missing the clip.
I'm having a little technical difficulty here. Let's see if I can do this right. I think that works. Does that work?
Close enough.
It's the best I can do. It's the best I can do. Good morning, good morning. Welcome back. Shabbat Shalom. It's wonderful to see people. Good morning. You have a question already? I haven't even started. A comment.
I want to thank you and everybody involved in planning and conducting that service.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. It was done, I got to tell you, like in 3 days. I mean, it was a lot of real. Thank Kenner Barron, because he's the one who put together all that beautiful music. And we're so grateful for the guests who came, for Craig and Ronnie and Dr. D and Reverend Bob and just wonderful people. And it came from far away, and it was really very, very special. Those of you who weren't with us, you can get it online. It's online now. It was a lovely, lovely service last night in tribute to the victims of Pittsburgh, and it's a sense of solidarity of the community. Thank you. It was really very special. Yeah. Use the mic. What? It's on. No, this doesn't. This mic doesn't do anything in the room. This just sends it across the world, right? So this sends it across the world. So it's on. It was on Facebook like last night. It'll be on vbs.org sometime today. I guess. I think so. That's not my world. So yeah, you'll be able to watch the service. It's a great new world. You don't have to come to shul. You can sit in your pajamas and worship the Lord. It's a great new world. Anyway, Shabbat Shalom, welcome. We're glad you're here. Following our study this morning, you're welcome to join us. There's a service in the sanctuary and playground minyan outside. And then there's lunch and then Torah study after that. This week, come in. This week, let me show you. Mitzvah Day is tomorrow. Have you got a clip by any chance? I have it tied to my tie, which seems to be working okay. It's just a little undignified. So we have Mitzvah Day tomorrow. Lots of wonderful projects for families and kids. We have on Wednesday night, College of Jewish Studies, and our guest will be Professor Barry Wimpheimer of Northwestern University, who's just finished a very important book on the development of Jewish law. And he'll be talking about the God that we meet in the Talmud. Very wonderful talk. Did you find one? Ah, God bless you. That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Although this just seems to be working pretty good, actually. Yeah, I'll just leave it. There we go. Thank you. And then it's the mic on the tie look. Yeah, and then on Thursday night, as we've announced, Tuesday's election day, so go and vote, okay? It's very important that you vote. If anybody can figure out the propositions, please call me. My wife and I, we both have degrees in Talmud. We can't figure them out. For the life of me, I don't know how much room a chicken really needs, except if it fits in my oven. That's all I know. I'm sure, that's Prop 12, I think, right? Yeah, and property tax, these things, I don't know. Property taxes. Then dialysis clinics, gay face. I'm not endorsing anything. Don't get upset. And then on Thursday night is the 80th anniversary of Kristallnacht. It's the 80th anniversary of the beginning of the Nazi onslaught against Jews of Europe. We're going to have a commemoration evening. We have a couple of people who are actually members of the community, members of the congregation who were there. They were young people at the time, right? And they're going to share with us their personal, Oscar's one of them, right? Their personal, we published your thing, by the way. It's now published to the world. You're famous. It'll be on, I'll send it to you, yeah. And
how did that happen?
Sorry?
How did that happen?
How did it happen? The gods wanted it to happen. I don't know. It's a beautiful remembrance. And then we're going to be doing a reading of a play by our friend Michael Halpern, which demonstrates, if I get this right again, what year was the meeting?
1938.
1938.
3 days after Kristallnacht.
3 days after Kristallnacht, the Nazi high command gathers to discuss the destruction of European Jews.
The destruction. How to get them out of Germany.
Well, it's a very
And the subtext is getting
right, the destruction of European Jewry. So it's a very interesting, it's a moment in history that Michael's recreated in a dramatic setting. And it's a chilling and remarkable moment. So please come and join us Thursday night at 7:30. Everybody is invited, okay? I think those are all the announcements for this week, unless I missed anything. But please go out and vote. Vote for people that are good, okay?
It's in Nizhnik, so everybody comes.
It'll be in the sanctuary, right? Yes. Okay. This morning, we are going to take a look back. So if you look with me, if you have a Chumash, if you don't, I'm going to read this, but if you have a Chumash, the Torah portion this week is called Hayei Sara. What's interesting about this Torah portion is that given what we did last week, Vayera is this Torah portion of remarkable theological depth. Last week is about Abraham arguing over Sodom and Gomorrah. Last week is about the sacrifice or the binding sacrifice of Isaac. Last week is this mind-blowing, astonishing meditation on what it means to live with God. This week is about normal stuff. It's almost an exact opposite. The themes of this week are the normal rhythms of life. The story begins with the death of Mother Sara and Abraham securing a burial place and burying her, and then the necessity to go and find a wife for Isaac. So while last week was about these astonishing moments of the divine human encounter, this week is about the normal ways that we meet God. Most of us don't have to meet God by binding our children to altars, thank God. Most of us don't meet God arguing over the fate of cities that are sinful or not. Most of us meet God in the normal routines of life and in the extraordinary moments that come to us as part of the routines of life, in the marriage of children, in the birth of grandchildren. Do you hear that, my kids? Birth of grandchildren, right? In the day-to-day failures and successes of life, and then in the tragic and personal moments of mourning and grieving as we say goodbye to loved ones. That's where most of us meet God, and that's what this morning's Torah portion is all about. And both stories, there's two main blocks of narrative in this morning's story. Both blocks of narrative, the purchase of the cave of Machpelah, the purchase of the burial place, and then the negotiation. Shirley, there's a space right over here, right? Rosie, is some room there for Cheryl? Or there, anywhere you want. All right. Good. Don't mind me. Come on, I love you. Come on, you know I love you. If it were anybody but you, they'd be gone by now. You know, you have immunity. The two narratives, this block of narrative over the purchase of the burial place, and this block of narrative over the negotiation for Rebekah's arrival in the family, are both two sort of dramas of manners. You watch the way that at this moment in life people conducted themselves, and what's taken for granted, and the kind of language that's used is just remarkable in both cases. In the first case, if you just follow this, it's a wonderful, it's funny to us because we're sitting on the outside at another civilization looking at this. But Abraham goes to the people, to the people of the land, and he says, I need to secure a burial place. And they say, sure, take any place. You're important. And he says, no, I want a particular place. They say, good, it's yours. And he says, no, I want to pay for it. They say, no, we couldn't accept money. What would a 400 shekel piece of property be between us? No. And they fully expect Abraham to start, like, for 400, are you kidding? No, and he actually goes along with it, and they can't believe he's agreed to the retail price, right? Jews have not changed. I want you to understand. And he said, 400 pieces. All right, 400 pieces. No, 400. What's a 400? No, I couldn't. All right, It's just a very interesting sort of comedy of manners, right? And then you have another one when the servant goes back to Mesopotamia. You read the story. The servant goes back to Mesopotamia to find the wife for Rebekah. Find a wife for Isaac, to find Rebekah for Isaac, right? And the kind of negotiation with the family. He says to them, I want your daughter, and they say, well, we're not so sure. And he has these bags of gold with him, right? He says, well, gee, I don't want to have to schlep these bags of gold with me back home. Well, we could talk about the daughter, And he says, gee, and I have these bags of silver with me. Oh, I think maybe we could find a way to let the kid go with you. It's just this wonderful comedy of manners. Well, she comes back with all this stuff, and then the last scene of this beautiful scene in the Bible. It's the biblical comedy version of Lawrence of Arabia, because if you just see what happens at the end, she's riding on a camel, which is anachronistic because there were no camels in that part of the world by then, and she's riding on this camel, at sunset, and there is Isaac in the sunset, and he's praying, he's davening mincha, he's praying, he's thinking, and she says, who is that? And the guy says, it's my master. And she puts on her veil, and they get a little closer, and she sees him. And then the Bible says, V'tipol min al-kamal. She fell off the camel. It's the first documented case of somebody literally falling in love, right? Some enchanted evening, you will fall from camels. I mean, it's just beautiful. And then she gets back up again, and he says, what's your name? And she says, Rebecca. He said, you're a klutz, but you're my wife. And they move into Sarah's tent, and he's comforted. What I want to do today is something I want to pay tribute to Mother Sara, because the Torah portion is called Hayei Sara. It begins with her death, and I want to go back and I want to meet her again. I want to see who she is. I haven't told you the page yet. I know I will in just a moment. Thank you so much. So let's begin, Marcia. Shall we begin on page 62? Begin on page 62, which is the first time we meet Mother Sara. If you don't have a chumash, there may be a few around. You could go into the synagogue and borrow one. You're welcome to do that. Don't steal it. It's a terrible thing to steal a Bible. Page 62 is the genealogy at the end of the Noah story that brings us up to date about who Abraham is, right? So if you go back one page to 61, and the last two pages, here is the line of Shem. Shem is one of the three sons of Noach. It's where you get the name Semites. They come from Shem, right? And then you have all these generations, and then it says, when Nachor lived 29 years, he begot Terach. And after the birth of Terach, Nachor lived 119 years, and he had a lot of kids. Terach lived 70 years. He had Abraham, Nachor, and Haran. Abram, Nachor, and Haran. That's our mishpacha, right? This is the line of Terach. Terach begot Abram, Nachor, and Haran. Haran begot Lot. Haran died in the lifetime of his father Terach in his native land Ur of the Chaldees. Avram and Nachor took to themselves wives, the name of Abram's wife being Sarai, and the name of Nachor's wife Milcah, the daughter of Haran. Right? So who did Nachor marry? He married his niece. Right? He married his niece. The father of Milcah and Iscah. And Sarai was barren and had no child. Who is Sarai's parents? It doesn't say. It tells you the other brother's parents, the other brother's wife's parents, but it doesn't tell you the parentage of the woman who's going to matter more. Isn't that odd? So right away you're introduced to a character who seems to drop out of nowhere. She doesn't seem to have a genealogy for some reason. The name Sarai is commonly understood to mean princess. There is a derivation from ancient Near Eastern languages where Sarai from the word Sar, meaning a princess. It can also be a reference to an Akkadian, a Middle Eastern goddess who is the goddess of thunder and goddess of lightning. That may be the error, but there's no derivation of her genealogy. Terach took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, the son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Abram, and they set out together from Ur. And they went as far as Haran, and they stopped there, and then Terach died. Now we turn to Lech Lecha, which is page 69. Okay? The Lord said to Abram, Lech Lecha me'artzecha me'eretz moladetcha me'beit avicha el eretz asher arekel. Get out of town. God said to Abram, leave home. Leave everything you know. Go. Go. And the narrative says Abraham went, as the Lord had commanded him. Abram was 75 years old, and when he left Haran, and he took his wife Sarai and his brother's son Lot. So I want you to notice right away, she has no family, and the first thing that we know about her is she's taken. She is an object of somebody else's action. She is not the subject of the action. And this is going to be an interesting reflection about her. And this is for every wife who has ever been told by a husband, honey, I just got transferred to some godforsaken place. Pack the house, we're leaving. I did this once. When I was a young teacher, I was so stupid. I used to do bibliodrama with our kids. I used to, you assign roles, and the kids get to play out these roles. You're God, you're Abraham. So I had an open house one night with the parents. And so the parents come and I say, I do bibliodrama with the kids. Let's practice for just a minute. Would anybody like to be Abram? So some guy comes and he's Abram. So would anybody like to be Sarah? Some woman says, I'll be Sarah. So I bring them to the front of the room and I sit them next to each other and I say, okay, Abram, you've just been told by God, Lech Lecha, leave home and go to the wasteland of Canaan. And you have to come home and tell your wife to pack the house, we're leaving. And as soon as I said that, she turned to him and says, you son of a bitch. You never asked me what I want. And I realized that, oh my God, and she happened to be speaking with a South African accent. And I realized, oh shoot, I have just stepped into something nuclear, right? You never asked me. I gave up my mother and my father and my sisters. I gave up a job and a career and a house and moved to this godforsaken place in Texas. And this is it. And her husband, of course, by this time is sitting in the back of the room under the desk, But this is the drama. The drama is she's taken, and she has nothing to say about it at this point. She is object. But come in, Mick, please, come in, have a seat, come find a seat. But the objectification of, is a place over here, over there, next to Shirley, there. The objectification of Sarah becomes even more acute when we take a look at the next set of stories. which I'm going to confess to you at the beginning, I don't understand. But I don't feel so bad that I don't understand, because as far as I can see in my research, nobody understands this story. So Rashi didn't understand it, the Midrash didn't understand it, and modern scholars don't understand it. Feminist scholars scream about it, but nobody can quite explain it. Turn to page 72. So Abram follows God's instructions, goes to Canaan. Okay? And what happens there? There's famine. There's always famine in Canaan. Canaan is a place of famine because, like California, it has no rivers. Right? It has no rivers. The Jordan River, you've heard about the Michael row the boat. You can't row a boat ashore. You can't row a boat across the Jordan River because it's like the LA River. It's like a pitiful excuse for a river. It's like Nebuch, that's a river, you know. It's not a river. It's like a gully, epis, you know. You couldn't row a boat ashore. You could slip one on top and walk across. It's Nebuch. So there's no water source. It either rains and you eat, or it doesn't rain and you starve. There was famine. I'm on page 72, the last two lines of the text, top left-hand corner. There was famine in the land, and Abraham goes down to Egypt. Why do you go down to Egypt as there's famine in Canaan? Because there's always food there. Why is there food there? Because they have a river. If God were smart, he would have put us in a place where there was a river. Right? Think of all the places we could have been, right? But we got stuck. All right, anyway. He went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe. Now here comes the story, and I don't understand it. Explain it to me. As he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, I know what a beautiful woman you are. If the Egyptians see you and think, she's his wife, they'll kill me and let you live. Say that you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and I may remain alive thanks to you. This is Father Abraham. I mean, really? So what's the plan here? Could somebody explain the plan? Yes, David, what's the...
Unless you don't want to go forward to Abimelech.
I'm about to get to that too. All right, so the plan is, what's he afraid of? First of all, what is he? He's afraid. The man has been told, Lech lecha me'artzecha, leave the safety and security of your home, go into the world, I, God, the God of the universe, I'm going to protect you. Abraham's first story, it's the first story. So he gets to the land and says, not a good place to be, takes off to Egypt. Gets to the borders of Egypt, and what does he do? He thinks that God promised me protection. Look at my wife. God promised me protection. Oy vey. And what is he afraid of? They're going to take her, and they're going to kill him. So say that you're my sister. What's the plan, though? If you're my sister, Douglas, what?
It's going to pimp her out.
No. No. But what's his plan is this, if you're my sister, then
They're not going to kill me.
they're not going to kill me. They'll think that you're eligible for marriage. They'll pay me for your hand in marriage. No. Did anybody learn this in Hebrew school as a kid? I don't remember learning this in Hebrew school as a kid. Yeah, no kidding. Right? So here's the story. I have to say, you should write that. There is a quality of comedy to this. When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw how beautiful a woman she was. Right? And by the way, this is one of the tropes through the whole story. No matter how old she gets, she's just ravishing. She's gorgeous. Right? This is a good thing. Pharaoh's courtiers saw her and praised her to Pharaoh. This is this big metropolis, but she gets singled out, right? Because you have to imagine how you would film this, you know, because you can see her in the crowd, right? And the woman was taken to Pharaoh's palace. Uh-oh. And because of her, it went well with Abram. He acquired sheep, oxen, asses, male, female, slaves, she-oxes, and camels.
So why was I wrong?
What? No. The theory being, if I take your sister, I owe you a bride price. I owe you a bride price. So Abraham gets paid for the woman as any brother would get paid if Pharaoh took her into the palace. But now we got a problem, right? What's the problem? She's a married woman, and we would like her to go back with her husband. So how are we going to make this work? But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his household with mighty plagues on account of Sarai. So the tradition says, well, this is a foreshadowing of what's coming, right? But some kind of plague, and you can only imagine, if you had a little sense of humor, what plague it could be, right? I mean, just have some fun with this. I mean, come on. Got to have a little sense of humor here, right? Pharaoh sent for Abram. So in the middle of the night, he calls for Abram, and he says, what is this you've done to me? It has to have been more graphic than that, right? Why did you not tell me she's your wife?
How did he find out?
Well, Pharaoh, Egypt is the capital of magic. Pharaoh has all these magicians. Remember when Moses comes and produces plagues? The magicians reproduce them, right? So Pharaoh, he's good at this stuff. He knows from plagues, and he knows something's going on, and he tries to figure out why, and he goes and he gets Abram, and he says, why didn't you tell me this, right? So why didn't you tell me she's your sister? So I took her as my wife. Now, here is your wife. Take her and get the heck out of here, right? And then the next line is classic. Because Pharaoh says, Pharaoh put men in charge of him, and they sent him off with the wife and all that he possessed. What do you mean he put men in charge of him? What did he do? They escorted him to the border. Right? They want this guy out of here because he's bad luck. He's bad news. Now, if that's not bad enough, if that doesn't curl your hair, turn now to page 109, where the whole story repeats itself. Okay? This is a story that Michael referred to last time, right? Look at the very bottom of the column. This one's a little more graphic. So this one's rated R. Okay? Abram journeyed from there to the region of the Negev. He lives in the Hebron. So he goes south, okay? And he settles between Kadesh and Shur. And when he was sojourning in Gerar, Abram said of Sarah, his wife, she's my sister. He keeps doing this. It's just, he keeps, well, that's the problem. Either he made money on it, or he keeps having this fantasy that they're going to kill him, right? He's afraid of what's going to happen. He's going around the countryside, and he's a minor sheikh. Think of Bedouins, right? And think of a Bedouin sheikh. A Bedouin sheikh is a householder who has he carries his flocks. He's moving flocks around so they can graze, right? And he comes up against a city, and he doesn't want the guys from the city attacking him. And the thing that he has, which he's most afraid of, isn't the wealth, it's the wife. She's this amazing, powerful woman, and men can't resist her. Did you say, oi? That was so nice. That was so sweet. Oi, This is the first Jew. I mean, this is the first Jewish mama. This explains a lot. I want you to enjoy this, right? This is the birth of patriarch as wuss. I mean, it's wonderful. King Abimelech of Gerar had Sarah brought to him. How old is she? She's 90. Yeah, I mean, but she's a hot 90. I just want you to appreciate this. Yeah, 90 is the new 20, right? Exactly. Right. That's great. That's very good. That's very good. Yeah, Miss Geritol, that's 1580 BC. God came to Avimelech in a dream by night. Now, what we have, when you have a story in the Bible and you have a second story which is a repetition, the two stories play off each other. The writer knew this. Either the editor had two independent narratives of the same basic motif, which is one possibility. But what's more likely is that the second story is a commentary on the first. So now we're going to fill in some of the details that we didn't have with the Pharaoh story. How did Pharaoh know? Why was Pharaoh so upset? So in the Abimelech story, they're going to give us the same motif, but with more detail. God comes to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, you're going to die because of the woman you've taken. She's a married woman. Now, is it because she's Sarah and she has special protection? Could be. But what more likely appears what?
She's married in
which means what? God, one of the reasons why this narrative is here is because, number one, gods were local. The Mesopotamian pagan idea was a god is local, right? You have the god of Tarzana. The god of Tarzana has no jurisdiction in Encino, okay? And the gods of Encino have no jurisdiction in Van Nuys. But here you have a radical new idea of God. You have a universal God, a God who has jurisdiction everywhere, a God who can exert will to shape history in all jurisdictions, everywhere. So Abraham goes down to Egypt, and God follows him there and protects him. Abraham goes down into the Negev. God follows him there and protects him. That's one of the reasons for this narrative. This is a radical new theological idea, a God that's not local, a God that's not tied to a place. That's number one. But number two is what you pointed out. It's very, very important. This is a God who has a set of moral standards for whom? For everybody. There are special commandments to Israel, special commandments to the Jews. Abraham is told to circumcise himself and everybody in his family. That's just for Jews. That's just for Israelites. There are commandments that apply to Israel. But here you get a new idea. Because there's a God of every place, there's a set of morality. We would call it common decency. The notion of common decency, which is expected of all human beings. And one of the moral standards of common decency expected of everybody is you don't touch a married woman. She's married. She's off limits. You don't touch a married woman. So God comes to him and says, the hell's wrong with you? She's a married woman. You're going to die. And Abimelech, who is not a Jewish king, he says, okay. Now, Abimelech had not approached her. Why is that important to tell us that? This is what Michael said last week. What's going to happen next? She's going to get pregnant with Isaac. So we need to know who's Isaac's papa. Abraham, not Abimelech, right? And the problem is, his name is Abimelech, which means my dad's the king. You don't want Isaac. So the Torah has to tell us specifically they hadn't yet touched each other, right? Abimelech had not approached her. He said, "O Lord," now listen to this and compare this to the Sodom story, right? "O Lord, will you, God, slay people even though they're innocent?" It turns out that everybody sort of picked up the Abraham trope, right? Poor God can't get away with nothing anymore, right? You can't touch me. If it's common decency that you're appealing to, common justice, common decency says you punish the guilty, but you don't punish the innocent, right? You, God, want common decency? I'm innocent. He said to him, he himself said to me, she's my sister. Number one, I'm innocent. I brought her to my house because Abraham said he was the sister. She was the sister. Right? She said to me, he's my brother. Now, is it possible that that's true? Yes. There is a tiny thing you'll see in a moment. They may have been on two different ways. A, she may have been, and you'll see this in just a minute. It's in verse 11. Abraham's going to say, she is my half-sister. She's a sister. Look at verse 12. When Abraham explains himself, which we'll get to in a minute, she's in truth my sister, my father's daughter, though not my mother's. Could be. The other thing that it could be is there was an institution in ancient Near Eastern law in which if a couple was especially close for certain legal reasons, a man was capable of adopting his wife as his sister. There was such an institution, right? Okay, it's sort of for tax law. No, for tax law, because you have a different deduction if she's your sister than your wife. So you're allowed to adopt her, legally, formally adopt her as a sister. Adopting someone as a sister is a weird institution, but this was allowed in certain ancient Near Eastern law codes. So the possibility is he's not lying. Doesn't make it better, especially if you're Sarah, but he's not exactly lying. So she says he's my brother. When I did this is back to our text, this is Abimelech. When I did this, my heart was blameless and my hands were clean. Right? And God said to him, I knew that you did this with a blameless heart, and so I kept you from sinning against me. right? I'm the one that kept you from doing this, right? That's why I did not let you touch her. They want to emphasize that twice. Therefore, restore the man's wife, since he is a prophet. He will intercede for you to save your life. If you fail to restore her, know that you'll die and all that are yours. Tough guy, you know. Early the next morning, it's interesting that he waited till the morning, right? Early the next morning, Abimelech called the servants and told them what had happened, and the men were greatly frightened. Abimelech summoned Abram and said to him, "What the hell did you do this for?" I'm sorry. "Why have you done this to us? What wrong have I done that you should bring guilt upon me and my kingdom? You have done to me things that ought not be done." You see what's being negotiated here? We'll come back to Sarah in a minute. But what's being negotiated here is something very interesting. There is a set of ethics. There is a moral standard that applies to everyone. And Abimelech's argument with God, as it were, and his charge to Abraham is, why did you violate those ethics? And listen to Abraham's answer. It's great. What then, Abimelech demanded, what was your purpose in doing this? And Abram said, I thought, surely there is no yirat Elohim. There is no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. That phrase, yirat Elohim, is the phrase that's used everywhere in the Torah and later in the later Bible to refer to common moral decency. And it always occurs in contexts where a Jewish person, a Hebrew, is meeting a non-Hebrew. A Jew is meeting a non-Jew. And it refers to a sense of common decency that unites all decent people. This is one of the contexts. I'll give you another one. When Joseph's brothers face him, and they think that he's the viceroy of Egypt. They don't know that he's Brother Joe. They think he's just this viceroy. The conversation is there yirat Elohim in this place? Are you going to do the right thing, the common decent thing? In the book of Leviticus, in the Holiness Code, in chapter 19, it says, you will rise before an elder. Why? Because that's yirat Elohim. That's not just a Jewish commandment. That's a commandment incumbent on all decent people. Yirat Elohim is the phrase for a standard of common decency. So one of the purposes of these narratives is to demonstrate these two ideas, which are brand new to the world. A universal God, and B, a universal morality. A universal morality. That's not based on God. It's yirat Elohim, but it's not that God said, thou shalt. It's something that all decent people understand. You don't murder the innocent. You don't sleep with a man's wife. You don't take what's not yours. This is common moral decency expected of all decent human beings. That's the phrase yirat Elohim. So Abraham said, I'll be right with you, says, I didn't know that, and we would say conscience. This is what Rabbi Shulweiss suggested is the word for conscience in the Bible. This is conscience, right? I didn't know there was decency in this. I thought you'd kill me because of my wife. I thought this was a place of lawlessness, right? And besides, she is in truth my sister because she's my father's daughter, etc. So when God made me wander from my father's house, I said, let this be the kindness that you do me. Whatever place we come to, say he's my brother. Now, just stop for a second. That's the theological point. Let's go back to our first question. What does this do to Sarah? What is Sarah's position in the narrative here? Can I pass the mic back to Sandra? Hang on. Pass the mic back. We have to get you on the mic here. I want to hear what is Sarah's position in the narrative here?
She's just
speak right into it. It doesn't go.
She's just a possession.
She's a possession.
Yeah.
Let's at least put it this way. She's object. She's object, not subject. She does not have a voice in the determination of her destiny. She's passed around.
But since Abraham left with the protection of God, why isn't Abraham punished at all for doing for what he does, for passing her off? What does he think if he passes her off as a sister? Obviously,
the question I kept asking, and I kept looking in all the sources, both the Jewish sources and the more modern, the Jewish traditional sources and the modern sources. What was he thinking was going to happen next?
Yeah.
So Pharaoh would take her and marry her and he'd never see her again? Is that his plan? Or was the plan that he would take her and then give her back? I mean, and would Abraham marry her if she'd been in the household of Pharaoh for any period of time? But I think your first observation is very important. This is the essence of this patriarchal society where woman is object, right? Male is the subject of the narrative, and woman becomes object. And in both stories, you wince. Don't you wince? You say, like, come on, you're Abraham. You have such heroism in so many contexts, but in these contexts, there's something wrong. Maybe that's the purpose of the narrative, is to show you that he doesn't begin as being a knight of faith. He begins as being a man filled with fear. Both of these stories demonstrate his deepest, deepest fear.
And God permits it because not only that, he gets all of his possessions.
God permits it, and he gets away with it.
He
Yeah.
becomes wealthy,
Yeah.
and then he gets to keep it. He's not even punished.
He doesn't have to pay it
take
back.
Everything that you have,
Right.
Acquired. And leave.
Right. It's the price is right, you know. Yeah. Pass it around here.
But then do we have to look at Abraham in the context of the time in which he lived?
Yes.
So if this was
Yeah.
actually the norm,
Yeah.
then maybe he had to change. He had to be the agent of change.
Okay.
For this, but maybe it wasn't that out of the ordinary.
It wasn't out of the ordinary. It's because in order to understand the narrative, you've got to understand all of these categories, right? All of these expectations. So you're exactly right. What would we have wanted the story to say? Right? You would wanted the story to say, he gets to the border of Egypt and he prays to God and says, God, this is my wife. They're going to kill me and take her. Protect us. And you'd say, well, God protected them. But that's not going to happen. Right? So in a certain way, I still think you're right. I think that he does what's normal, and I think that's what's disappointing. You'd want him to do something extraordinary. You'd want there to be some reflection of faith, of moral growth, of something. Maybe I'm sure that's a modern projection. I'm sure that's a modern projection, no question. But still. But what? Well, that's the question. I don't think God chooses him because he's this moral genius. I think God chooses him because he has the potential to grow into a moral genius. But so far he hasn't done it. So far he hasn't done it. Now, we'll get a few more comments, but I'm going to tell you that the next set of narratives, she becomes subject. And it all has to do with progeny. It has to do with the birth of a child. And it's not going to be any more happy. You're going to end up still feeling pretty low about this. Let's pass the mic around. Thanks.
Is there any reference to such incidents earlier? How did he...
Not earlier in the Torah. There are references to this in other literatures.
How did he come up with such a thought?
How did he come up with such a thought?
Yeah, that his wife will be, will save him.
Oh, look, first of all, I think it's likely on the one hand that she actually was related to him. She may not have been his actual sister, but she could have been a relative. As you can see, the brother marries the niece. So it's very likely that she was some sort of cousin, because they married cousins in this family, right? Right? Don't try this at home.
I'm referring...
That's number one. Number two, I think that I don't know if this occurs anyplace. I didn't see this referred to in any other. I think that we're trying to see his fear. On the one hand, we see him as the knight of faith, God's chosen one, and God promises to protect him. But on the other hand, he's like us. He's us. He's human. He's scared. He's walking the world. Nobody protects him. He's not part of a larger tribe. He's not part of a kingdom. He's not living in a city with walls. He's vulnerable. And his vulnerability keeps staring at us, and it warps his vision. Right? Does he love her? That's the question I'm going to ask you at the last minute of the talk. Does he and what does love mean in this context? Does he love her? And frankly, think of Fiddler on the Roof, right? Did he love her? Did he love her at the beginning, or did he love her at the end? And how did he grow to love her? For 125 years, I've washed your clothes, given you children, milked the cow. 120, my bed is his. If that's not love, what is? then you love me. Except for that time when you gave me to Pharaoh. Right? I mean, that really is the question, okay? All right? Yes, it's over here. Yeah, pass it around, pass it around. Yeah. When you get a second, turn to page 86. Go ahead.
The question is,
Yeah, please, Bob.
Abraham trusted God,
Yeah.
and he listened, and he did what God told him.
Yes.
So to me is like he didn't have enough trust to say what he said about his wife. And it wasn't any love there. If there wasn't any love, he would sacrifice himself for his wife.
Wow.
So there's no love there, then there's no trust between him and God.
Yeah. So for a minute, let me be Abraham's defense attorney. Shall I? Yeah, he says Abraham is supposed to trust God. But when he gets to Egypt, all that trust is gone. And we would have hoped that he would be prepared to sacrifice himself to protect his wife, but he doesn't. He plays this game. And it appears to be a lack of trust. And I think you're right. I think that's the troubling part of the narrative.
I have a different
Right?
view.
I know, but hang on. It's not your turn. Okay? So for just a moment, consider this. He starts out in Haran. And now, I'll tell you what Haran looks like. Haran is a Mesopotamian camel depot. You remember Star Wars, the first one? You remember the town where they go to find Han Solo? It's where the famous bar scene is. That's Haran. This is Dodge City. This is any Western town with a bar, a general store, a brothel, a hotel, and a lot of cows. This is a town where everybody walks around with a gun. That's where Abraham grew up. Small, scruffy, dusty town. Then God finds him and brings him to Canaan, which is even more scruffy, dusty, and hard. This is Arizona, okay? A land of nothing, right? Then there's famine. So he goes to Egypt, right? And he shows up at the gates of Egypt. And the gates of Egypt were mamish gates. We have them. They're in museums. They're 12, 15 feet high. This is a civilization. This is an urban center. This is a metropolis. This is a small town guy showing up in a big city. He's scared. They speak weird languages here. And he looks around, and he has no wealth at the beginning, but he has this, like, awfully good-looking wife. And everyone's looking at her. And he says to himself, holy wife, what am I going to do? You just have to gather in his fear and the vulnerability about this. That's my only defense, okay? My only defense is that in this particular circumstance, I don't justify it. But I get it. You know, small town guy comes to a big city, right? And he's afraid. He doesn't know what goes on. That's why he's so surprised when Abimelech says, I didn't touch your wife, and Avram says, I didn't know there was any decency in this place. I didn't know that in this place anybody had any kind of decency whatsoever. Right? You ever get a flat tire fixed in the middle of nowhere? And the kid in the gas station says, $10. And you say, $10? I thought it was going to be $110. Kid says, no, it's $10 to fix a... You ever have that experience? Right? Or a mechanic looks under the hood and said, I can fix it. It'll take me 15 minutes. And when you say, let me pay you, the guy says, nah, come on, it's what I do. You ever have that experience? And you say to yourself, in the middle of nowhere, you could have taken complete advantage of me and you didn't. My God, I didn't know there was decency out here in the middle of nowhere. You have that sense. That's Abraham's sense here. That doesn't make him better vis-a-vis Sarah. I'm not justifying that. I'm just trying to get into his head for a minute. Okay, you want to give the gentleman the microphone? Okay, then you'll get next. You'll be next. Okay, please. Then I want to look at Sarah as subject. Go ahead, please.
Abraham in both occasions
Yeah.
chose the third version.
Yeah.
When he did not have opportunity to choose either one, he relied on God and gave a parole to God. Let the God decide about it.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Except if you're Sarah, it's not like Abraham had anything to risk here. You know, if he was really, give it to the gentleman on the corner there, the black jacket there. If it was really Abraham, he would have kept Sarah and said, God protect me. Instead, he puts her into the brothel, into the harem, and says, God protect her. That's a little odd. Yes, please.
Well, regarding like why Abraham was chosen to begin with.
Yeah, go ahead.
I like to think it's due to how clever he was and his practicality. Like
Yeah.
he figured out, hey, there's only one God. Statues can't be gods, things like that.
Yeah,
so
good.
He's doing the same thing. Like, why try and rely on God to protect himself when he can just say, okay, tell them you're my sister, and we shouldn't have any problems.
All right, so this is a very nice comment. So what he's saying is, he says, look, the reason why Abraham was chosen to begin with wasn't because of his moral depth. It was because of his clever ability to figure stuff out, to solve problems, right? That monotheism is ultimately a technical problem of figuring out what had to be in the world. So what he exhibits in each of these areas is not moral depth, but technical acuity, which is not bad. That's not a bad. Hang on a second. So that's not a bad conversation. Yeah, Michael, quickly with the next piece, because we got to get into the kid now.
It's too long. I'll
All right,
talk to you later.
Yeah. All right. So take a look at page 86. Sarai, page 86, chapter 16. Now she becomes subject, but the subject has to do with progeny. Now, what's the problem with progeny? The problem is Abraham has a covenant. Covenants are passed on hereditarily. There's no heir. There's no heir. And the irony is that God keeps promising him to be Avraham, to be father of nations, and he doesn't even have one kid. So how does this work? So in a certain sense, this isn't just Sarah. This isn't just Sarah's loyalty to Abraham. This is Sarah's loyalty to the family project. The covenant has to be passed down through the generations. We need a child. Now, what she's about to do is going to sound awful in our ears, but in the ears of an ancient Middle Easterner, it wasn't so awful. This was done all the time. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. You had different levels of women's status. And a woman who was a handmaid was, in fact, by law, sexually available to the master of the house. Right? She wasn't the wife, but it was like a secondary wife. She's a lady in waiting. A secondary wife. She enjoys the protection of the household. She eats at the master's table. She's protected by the household. And her children are actually heirs to the master. They may not get as much as the heir for the heir born from the wife, but they'll be heirs to the family fortune. Okay? If you know Game of Thrones, think Jon Snow. Okay? That's really what it is. Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne no children. So not only is she like passed around, but she's also barren. These are the things we know about her. She had an Egyptian maidservant. According to the Midrash, Hagar was the daughter of Pharaoh, given to Abraham as a prize to get Sarah out of the house. This was a part of the fortune that Abraham earned, but that's Midrash. She had an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar. Sarai said to Abram, this is the first time she speaks. This is her first speech in the Bible. She says, Vatomer Sarai el Avram, Hinei na. Hinei na. It's translated here as look, not good. Hinei means, no, don't say anything, just go. That's hinei. Okay? Na means please. This is not a command. There'll be commands coming later. This is a plea. Na, please. This is a prayer. Hinei na. Right? Atzarani Adonai miledet. God has kept me from bearing a child. Right? Bo na. Second na. Na. Second na. Please come. Please be. El shifchati. Come to my maidservant. Right? Be with my maidservant. Ulai ibaneh mimena. Ibaneh mimena. What's the translation? Perhaps I shall have a son through it. No, better than that. Ulai means perhaps. Ibaneh comes from the word bana, means to be built, to construct something. Ibaneh, I will be built. It's passive. It's passive. It's nifal. I will be built up. I will be built up. Right? The word to be built up. I will be built up. I will have destiny. I will have progeny. I will have eternity. Right? If I don't have a kid, I die and no one remembers I lived. But if I have a child, someone carries me into the future. Ulai ibaneh. And it's passive form. I will be built up. Mimena, through her. Through her. There's something plaintive about that. I want you to hear the plaintive about this. She's hurting. She's in pain. She's frustrated. She's broken. Ulai ibaneh mimena. Without her, I can't be. I'm not fully me. I'm not fully woman. I'm not fully human. I have no destiny. Ulai ibaneh mimena. Vishma Avraham likol Sarai. Now, the next thing you want is you want him to hug her, for God's sakes. You want him to respond to the plaintiff. What does he respond to? It's interesting. It says, Vayishma Avraham likol isha. Likol Sarai. You didn't need to have the word likol in that sentence. You could have said, Vayishma l'Sarai. Right? He listened to Sarah. Likol Sarai. Which means what? Yeah, so what does that mean? Do you think so? You think that, or do you think it's the opposite? I think it's the opposite. I think he hears the request. He doesn't hear the pain behind the request. What's the difference between answering the stated question and answering the unstated question? What's the difference between responding to what your partner said and responding to what your partner didn't need to say? Because you've been partners long enough to hear it. I think this is an indictment of him. Likol Sarai, he heard what she said. He didn't hear what she didn't say. What didn't she say? I'm falling apart inside. I'm broken. I'm distraught. I'm destroyed. He just heard the comment. So what does he do? What was that? The sound effects are fabulous in this place. That was brilliant. That was brilliant. This child should have a mother who's a rabbi. Thank you, Reba. That was beautiful. That was member of the Torah study. You have a comment. Give her the microphone. All right? Right? So Sarai, Abraham's wife, right? V'tikach Sarai eshet Avram. Look at the careful the wording this is. V'tikach Sarai eshet Avram. We knew that she was his wife. Why does it rub it in that eshet Avram? She's doing this for him. She's doing this for his promise. Right? And it's breaking her heart. Et Hagar HaMitzrit, she took Hagar the Egyptian, right? After 10 years of being in the land, and gave her to her husband Abram as concubine. No, that's not right. Look at the Hebrew again. I'm sorry for keep referring to Hebrew. You got to learn Hebrew, guys. Vatiteno tala Avram. She gives her to Abram, right? Isha. Her man, but Isha is her man, and it's also, if you just look at the letters, it's, her, yes, it's her man, lo le Isha. The Hebrew's brilliant. Isha lo le Isha.
Yeah, but you see, the first time you have...
Yes. The first time it's her man, and the second time it's, it's brilliant. Le Isha. Le Isha, to be a woman, to be a wife, to have as a woman. Le Isha. Now, it's really ambiguous because it's interesting. She gives the maid to Abraham. Le Isha. It could be to have as a wife, to have as a woman. So it's describing Hagar. Can it also describe Sarah? She's giving the maid to Sarah, to Abram, to make herself a full woman, so she'll have a kid. because she won't be fully a mother. She won't be a wife. She won't be a mother. She won't have fulfilled her responsibilities to the destiny of the tribe, of the community, of the people until they have a kid. Le'isha, to make herself into a full woman. It's a very plaintive and painful. The wording of this, what I'm trying to say is the wording of this in Hebrew is very delicate. It's very delicate. It's loaded with double entendres. It's loaded with echoes of meaning. And the Torah, I think, is reaching to try to tell us something about the broken inner life of Mother Sarah. And Abraham doesn't get it at all. He's oblivious. And Rose says, I'm not surprised. Why are you not surprised? Why are you not surprised? Because patriarchs make lousy husbands? Is that why? It's because you can lead a great revolution in the world's perception of divinity, but you can't even listen to your wife's pain? Is it because, it's a very, that's such a wonderful midrash. Rose's midrash. Rose, Rashi, next to Rashi is going to be Rose, which says, and I'm not a bit surprised. So what happens? He cohabited with Hagar, and she conceived. Ugh. This is the Andrew Dice Clay version of the Torah, right? Bada bing, bada bang, right? And then 10 years, Abraham and Sarah are together in the land waiting for a child. No kid. The first night, as bingo, right, there you go, fair enough, right? And now what happens? Now what happens? As Hagar's belly is getting bigger, what's happening to Sarah's sense of self? It's getting smaller, right? Is it actually that Hagar looked down on her mistress? Did that really happen? There is a law in the Code of Hammurabi. The law in the Code of Hammurabi says that when a woman, a wife, that's status number 1, has a maid, that's status number 2 or 3, and maid, status number 2 or 3, who gets to have sexual relations with the master, right, lords it over her mistress, diminishes her mistress in some way, the mistress is permitted to sell her from the household on the slave market. In other words, this scenario is prefigured in the Code of Hammurabi, which means that the reader of this in the ancient Near East would have said, sure, I know that law. That happens all the time. So here we have a situation. As Hagar's belly is getting bigger, Sarah's sense of self is getting smaller. Whether or not Hagar said anything. In fact, I think you can make Hagar into a completely innocent bystander in this story. She's as much an object of the story as is Sarah. I mean, what did Hagar have to say? Oh, my back is aching. Right? Sorry? What? I have no. Hagar's pregnant, and Sarah's not. So anytime Hagar says anything but, I wonder if it's a boy or a girl, or I have to run to the bathroom every 15 minutes, or we're taking the childbirth class at the hospital on Tuesday nights, Anything innocent about her condition, Sarah's going to take it as an attack. Ellie, yeah. You want to say something? Okay. I mean, you see, so you can see that this is not a good situation. Did everybody see that? So what happened? Sarai said to Abraham, the wrong done me is your fault. She snaps. What happened to the plaintive plea? The nah, it's gone. Now she's angry. You did this to me. You bastard, you did this to me. Right? I myself put my maid in your bosom. Now she sees that she is pregnant. I am lowered in her esteem. The Lord decide between you and me. Abraham said to Sarah, the maid's in your hand. That's law. That's ancient Near Eastern law. She's your maid. You do with her as you want. Deal with her as you think rightly. Then Sarah treated her harshly, and she ran away. So Hagar runs away. And an angel found her by a spring of water in the wilderness and said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? Which is the big question here. And she said, I'm running away from my mistress. And the angel said, go back to your mistress and submit, because I'll greatly increase your offspring and there'll be too many to count. The angel of the Lord said further, behold, you are with child and will bear a son. You'll call him Ishmael, for the Lord has paid heed to your suffering. He'll be a wild ass of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him as you dwell in the land of his kinsmen. She's given this amazing prophecy of power, powerful prophecy. Who is she after all? She is a slave girl to Sarah. I mean, she's in the social structure, she's a nobody. But she gets a promise almost as big as Abraham's. And she gets it. She's the first woman in the Torah to get this kind of a promise, right? I mean, think about it. She's an important person in this, right? And then the name of the place is El Roi, the God that I see. And it's Be'er Lechai Roi. So Hagar bears a son. What happens to the kid? Well, let's take a moment and let's see what happens to Sarah. While this kid is living in a household, now we got to go ahead to the next Torah portion. 3 angels show up. We're on page 99. This is the next Sarah story, right? Okay, Ronnie, you have a question? Sorry, Doug. I'm sorry, Doug. Thanks. Thanks.
It doesn't say that the Pharaoh didn't have relations with Sarah.
Well, it sort of implies that they did, yeah.
If they did.
It doesn't say that Pharaoh didn't touch Sarah the way it said that Abimelech didn't touch her.
So in that case, the Pharaoh could be the father.
Oh, please. Probably not, because she doesn't get pregnant for about 10 years later.
Oh, okay.
Now,
Well,
listen, I read Facebook, so weird things happen.
It could be that the timing is not accurate.
It could be that the timing's not
and
accurate.
the second
yeah.
story was just
It could
a
be.
cover of the
It
first.
could be. I don't think so. I think the idea is that he didn't touch her. That's the idea. Page 99. The Lord appears to him at Mamre. He was sitting at the entrance of the tent. He sees 3 men. He runs and welcomes them. They turn out to be angels. Right? Page 101. They said to him, "Where is your wife Sarah?" And he says, "There in the tent." And then one angel says to him, "I will return to you next year when your wife Sarah shall have a son." Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent. So figure out the geography. Abraham and the 3 men are sitting in the middle of the household. Think about a circle of tents, right? Sarah is sitting in her tent, which is behind Abram's tent. So she is behind Abram's tent, but she can hear the conversation at the campfire, right? And she hears the angel say to Abraham, Sarah's going to have a kid, right? Sarah was listening to the answer, which is behind him. Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. Sarah had stopped having the periods of a woman. Sarah laughed to herself, saying, now that I am withered, am I to have enjoyment? And my husband, with my husband so old, right? Viagra will not be invented for another 3,800 years. This ain't going to happen. No, no, no. Then the Lord said, and this is God playing marriage counselor, right? God said to Abram, why did Sarah laugh? Why is Sarah laughing? What kind of laughter is that? What kind of laughter is that? Is it mimicking? Is it the laughter of wonder? The laughter of mimicking? The laughter of derision? Is this a woman who has spent the last 25 years waiting for a kid? And finally someone said, you're going to get pregnant? And she says, now? 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 Right? What, are you kidding? The Lord said, why is she laughing? Saying, in truth, am I to bear a child as I'm old? Notice what God leaves out. The part about my old man. God carefully leaves out her insult to Abram. Is there anything too wondrous for the Lord? Right? I'll return to you next year. Sarah lied, saying, I didn't laugh. God said, oh, yes, you did. Then the narrative stops. Now, ladies and gentlemen, only a married couple could have written that line. Right? You didn't need that last little vignette. It would have been enough. The prophecy is repeated. But the part about Sarah says, I didn't lie. And God says, sure you did. I mean, just why do you put that in? That is so juicy, right? Have you ever had that? You shouldn't have turned left. You shouldn't have turned left. You shouldn't have turned left. I needed to turn left. You shouldn't have turned left. I needed it. But, you know, and you know this was written by a male. How do you know this was written by a male? Because he gets the last word, right? In any marriage, the last word would have been hers. Right? The last word would have been, Sarah would have said, I didn't laugh. God said you did laugh. Sarah says, no, I didn't. That would have been how it really should have happened, right? But this was written by a guy, so they put it this way, right? Now, we have the birth, right? So what happens? The birth of Isaac is on page 112. Okay? A miracle birth. The Lord took note of Sarah as he'd promised. The Lord did for Sarah as he'd spoken. Sarah conceived and bore a son to Abraham in his old age at the time set which God had spoken. Abraham gave his newborn son, whom Sarah had borne him, the name of Yitzchak. Right? Thank you, Riva. Right? Yitzchak, which means what? Laughter. Laughter. And in this case, I think it's the laughter of wonder. My God, we had a kid finally, right? Abraham circumcised him on the 8th day. Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God brought me laughter. Everyone who hears will laugh with me. And she added, who would have said that to Abraham that Sarah would suckle children, and yet I've borne a son in his old age, and the child grew up and was weaned. But now we got a problem, right? What's the problem? We got 2 kids, right? So turn the page. Sarah saw the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham, saying, she said to, playing. The Hebrew word is interesting. She sees the son, and the Hebrew word is mitzachek. Mitzachek. Now, translation, mitzachek could be from misachek, meaning to fool around. Mitzachek can have a more serious kind of sexual connotation, right? The kid was a little too grabby. It can also have, before it had the connotation of what? Of laughter. She saw the older boy laughing at the younger boy. Remember the relationship between Sarah and Hagar? The same relationship could be parallel between the sons. And we don't know if this is what really happened or if this is what Sarah saw. The other possibility is, if you just take it quite literally, the kid's name is Yitzchak. The verb here is mitzachek, which could literally mean taking the place of Yitzchak. She doesn't want anybody taking her son's place. Now, technically in law, it's a disputable issue who's the firstborn here. Technically, you could make the case that Ishmael's the firstborn because he was born first. Or technically, you could make the case that even though Ishmael is born, Isaac has priority because he's the son of the wife, not the son of the concubine, of the handmaid. It becomes a really interesting issue. Who has the firstborn? Who is the firstborn? But Sarah doesn't want to take a chance. So what does she say? Cast out the slave woman and her son. Get rid of this kid. The son of that slave shall not share in the inheritance of my son Isaac. She never identified Ishmael as her son. She never did. The matter distressed Abraham because it's his son, it's his kid. For it concerned a son of his. But God says to Abraham, don't be distressed over the boy or slave. Whatever Sarah tells you, do as she says. All right? So God says to all Jewish husbands, do what your wife says. I know where you're going is not to the left, but turn that way anyway. It'll take you 10 minutes longer, but you'll save yourself a lot of grief. Right? And then God gave us GPS and settled the issue altogether. Moral GPS, right? As for the son of the slave woman, I'll take care of him. Right, so early the next morning, Abraham took some bread and skin of water and gave them to Hagar, and he sends them out to the desert. They're living in Hebron, and she wanders down to Beersheba. Anyone ever been to Beersheba? What's it like? What's it like? It's desert. It's a forbidding desert. It is a scary place to be without a canteen. And that's where Abraham sends the kid. Right? Now, God assures him that the kid will be okay. But when you have a person that you care for, you don't send them out to the... I mean, this is a crazy thing to do. This is a deeply crazy, morally questionable, murderous thing to do. And this is Sarah holding on to her resentment, holding on to her pain. It's the projection of all of the years of her infertility onto this slave woman and her son. Finally, I have a kid. Finally, this miracle has happened. I don't want anything getting in the way. But it's a really morally questionable story here. So what do you make of Sarah? What do you make of Sarah? Does Sarah love Abraham? Does Abraham love Sarah? There is one more little hint, and that's today's story. So let's take a look at that so you can leave without knowing, without reading at least some of Hayei. Sorry, it's on page 127, okay? Vayiyu Hayei Sara mea shanim ve'esrim shana. Sarah lived 127 years. That's a long time. Right? So Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham proceeded to mourn for Sarah. Vayavo Avraham. Now, why does it say Vayavo? Why does it say where was he at the moment? No, he's in Beersheba. After the Akedah, he went to Beersheba. Well, Hagar lives there. Don't try this at home. Vayavo Avraham lispod l'Sara. And then you see the next word in Hebrew. Again, you have to read Hebrew. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down. Second to the last line in Hebrew, the first word. Liv ko ta. And you see how the kaf in that letter is written small. It's printed small here. That's the way the calligraphy is in the Torah. There are a dozen places in the Sefer Torah where the calligraphy of the letters is abnormal. It's exceptional. And this is one of them. This is one of them. And in the Torah, if you look at it in this morning, the word liv kota is written like this. And the letter kaf in the middle is written small. Now what is the letter kaf? What does the word kaf mean? Anybody happen to know? The word kaf means your hand. The word kaf means the palm of your hand. If the kaf is small, what does that say about you? You have a small hand, which means what? You're diminished. Abraham, for the first time, recognizes who she was. He doesn't respond to her when she is in pain over her infertility. He doesn't know how to respond to the conflict with Hagar. He doesn't know what to do when she wants the kid thrown out. He doesn't understand the sibling rivalry. He doesn't get her ever until she dies. And when she dies, what does he discover? What does a man discover, having lived with his wife 100 and something years, that there's something missing in his life, that he is diminished, that his power is diminished, that his being is diminished. And the great tragedy of this marriage is that she accompanies him, she plays object to his subject, she plays womb, she's only giving him progeny, and he never acknowledges it, never acknowledges it, never acknowledges it until she dies. And finally, when she dies, liv kota. You didn't need that word, by the way. You could say the sentence, Vayavo Avram lispod Sara. Abram came to mourn for his wife. Done. The word liv kota means to cry over her. It's the only time Abram cries in the whole story. He doesn't cry when God says, take your son, your only one, the one you love, Isaac, and murder him. He doesn't cry. He doesn't cry when Isaac is rescued. He doesn't cry when he sends Ishmael out. Abraham doesn't cry, ever. He only cries here. Why does he cry? Is it guilt? Is it really guilt? Is it guilt? That's interesting, Brian. That's an interesting, no, you're right. It's got to be. But what else is it? I mean, something turns in him. And liv kota, he cries, and the kaf is small to say that his power, kaf is a man's power, it's the power of his hand. The kaf is small, his power is diminished. His being is diminished. Or what might have been. So, what might have been? What might have been, right? He finally discovers her. He finally discovers her. And the poor fool doesn't discover her until he comes to bury her. Yeah, please. Let's pass it on.
Something just dawned on me about this. I never realized it before. But
Yeah.
it's at this point that God leaves the story.
God leaves the
God
story.
leaves Abraham.
Yeah. God never speaks to Abraham again. God is not going to speak to Abraham again. Abraham, by the way, is going to go on and get married again at 148 years old and have 11 more kids. Kanai Nahara. Should only happen to you. Right? Mort, you're getting ready. You're almost there. Yeah. You're looking. You're right. I'd take it slow if I were you, Mort. Take it slow. Right? Right? Mort is my friend. And someone I respect. But I mean, I want you to... It's not fair to impose modern standards of feminism on an ancient text. But I think the Bible gives us enough clues in the way that it tells the story to open eyes to this relationship and to say that it's more than just, there was more here than just a master and his anonymous wife. There was more here than just a master and anonymous wife. That she gains a certain agency and she gains a place in his life and he develops in a certain way and something happens between them. And so at the end of the story, you got to sing the song, Do You Love Me? And the sad, sad tragedy of the relationship is she follows him, she goes with him, she's the object of his crazy adventures. She brings him a child at the age of 100, at the age of 90, he's 100. And he never acknowledged until she's gone, and then finally he opens his eyes and discovers who she was. So there's a couple comments in the back, and then we're going to... You have a comment? Yeah, go ahead.
Doesn't the Midrash say that the second wife is Hagar?
Yeah, Keturah is her name in the Bible, and she's identified with Hagar. So it goes back with Hagar. The Midrash also says a beautiful thing, which I'll we'll get some comments. The Midrash says that there was a light in Sarah's tent that burned from Friday to Friday. That's where the custom of Shabbos candles comes from. And that she baked challah every Friday. No. It's just, she baked a challah every Friday, and on the day she died, the light went out, and the aroma of challah left the camp. And when Rebekah will come from Mesopotamia to marry Isaac, when Rebekah enters Sarah's tent, Rebekah moves into Sarah's tent. Holy Sigmund Freud, right? Rebekah moves into Sarah's tent, the light came back, and the aroma of challah once again filled the camp on Friday afternoon, which is a beautiful midrash. Let's get a couple quick comments.
Maybe I'm missing the clue, but why do we think that Abraham has any enlightenment and just not sorry for himself in the same selfish way?
You could read it that way. You know, Brian read it as guilt, and you could see it that he's sorry for himself. I think it could be, of course, it could be. I just choose to read it the other way. Yeah, I know. I don't know. The leaf kotah, the fact that the kaf is small, which is such a clever way of saying he's diminished, right? He's diminished. He's something breaks inside of him. Something isn't right the letter's in the middle of the word. Like his heart is broken. That's how I read it. There's something. He finally realized what he had in a partner who accompanied him all these years, and it's too late to say thank you to her, right? Maybe it's because I've been a rabbi too long, and I've gone to too many funerals where too many loved ones said what I should have said to my loved one was, and that's my, and that's my burden. But maybe that's because I think that's what it is, because it could have been a much more formal statement, and it's not. It's a very emotional statement. Please.
I would say, isn't it though? Because so throughout the story, she's basically given him all this wealth by pretending to be his sister several times.
Right.
And then it comes full circle, and he says, "No, let me pay for her burial site."
Yeah.
And in addition, just to continue with it, going full circle.
Yeah.
She's also, when she acted the same way that he had.
Yeah.
And the adulteress saying like, "Okay, here, take Hagar." That's also what leads to conflict later on.
That's not adultery, though. That's not it would be today adultery. Okay, I want to make this really clear.
But not necessarily
in the context of that, in the context of that world, that was not considered adultery.
But
That was considered really normal, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? It was considered really normal that when you married a woman, if you were a person of upper class and you married a person of your own class, an upper class woman, then the handmaid, the lady in waiting that came with her, was considered available to the householder. We're going to stop here. Next week, we're going to open up the story of two brothers. So please come back. Have a very good week. Thursday night, please come and commemorate with us. Thank you.
Are you familiar with the expression, אשר איתם יקל ביניהם?
No.
ואשר יילקח
Yeah.
מהם